wonder if they can hear me. Is this on? Can you all hear me? You can? Okay. Thank you all for coming to our ASCM speaker series. Today, we are having Alex Deo from DHL. Alex is going to talk about innovation in logistics, how IoT and technologies like IoT are redefining supply chain visibility. With the potential to connect anything, anywhere, the Internet of Things has made full supply chain transparency even more possible. As the speed and reach of network telecom systems expand, sensors are becoming increasingly affordable. These developments promise new operational efficiencies through a dedicated IoT strategy. Alex will provide insights on how DHL is implementing these strategies and what the future of logistics looks like. Just to introduce Alex a little bit more, Alex Deo is the manager of innovation at DHL, responsible for SmartSolutions business development and IoT. Building on DHL's existing portfolio, Alex identifies innovative new technologies to add value and bolster DHL's position as the world leader in logistics. Prior to DHL, Alex has worked in the aviation industry, managing both operations and technology innovation. Alex holds a BS in Business Administration from University of Colorado. So let's give Alex a really warm welcome to Stillman and Seton Hall. And I have to say, Alex has come all the way from Chicago just to talk to us. Their innovation center is in Chicago. So we are really grateful that you're doing this for us.
Yeah, thank you. Can you guys hear me now, too? All right, wonderful. Dr. Renew did a wonderful job introducing me. Thank you very much, and thank you guys for having me today. My name is Alex Deo. I'm an innovation manager with DHL, focusing particularly on Internet of Things, or IoT. So that means pretty much it's a very terrifyingly broad subject, whether that's a connected device, and I have a few examples up here that I'll get to eventually, and that starts to reach into computer vision and AI, starts to creep a little bit terrifyingly into robotics and automation, which is definitely not my forte, but I can speak dangerously about it. With that, before I jump in, I'll tell you a little bit about the DHL Innovation Center and our mission and why we exist, and then I'll talk a little bit what we do there during the presentation. So there are 4 innovation centers globally, obviously in Chicago, probably the best one is what I would say. And then our mothership, the home base is in Germany, in Troisdorf, and then we have one in Singapore, and then we just opened a mobile innovation center in Dubai. That's an odd concept, but it actually packages itself up into ocean containers, and then we can ship it around the world and open an innovation center anywhere else. So the idea is we move it to Africa within the next 2 years. So I don't know how familiar you are with DHL in particular. I'm only 2 years with the company. Prior to that, I worked for United Airlines and Southwest Airlines doing their innovation programs. When I joined DHL, I thought it was a shipping company that delivered a yellow box out of a yellow van to your front door, and that was about it. And it's a little bit more complicated than that, is what I quickly found out, unfortunately. So there are 5 primary business units, is what they're called at DHL. So let's see if I can do this without looking at the slide. So I have DHL Global Forwarding. That's where Peter works. And by the way, that's a colleague, Peter, on the side there, who made the introduction. And they focus on freight forwarding. So it really functions as like a somewhat pseudo cross-dock facility. Think of some of the largest companies like Dell or Boeing or GE Healthcare. They're shipping these massive shipments. How do you move an MRI machine? So an MRI machine needs to move via a company like DGF. Incredibly awkward, but we need to move it through. We have DHL Express, which is what you guys are all familiar with. They're the ones driving the yellow vans, and I need to ship something to Germany. I'm going to use Express. Well, actually, I probably would use UPS, but I won't say that out loud. And then we have DHL Supply Chain. So this is probably the most interesting of the business units in DHL. When you're driving down the street and you see a facility for Kraft Heinz or Mondelez, those are likely, a lot of times, DHL supply chain. So you would never know it's a DHL facility, but inside those walls are hundreds of DHL employees, and it's a white labeled operation where employees are actually storing, repalling, and outbound distribution of all these goods. E-commerce, right, the fourth one. So who gets mail anymore? I know it's a weird concept, but does anybody get snail mail still? No, okay, wonderful. When you get a flyer in the mail from, let's say, Ulta, Ulta is sending a coupon out. You think that the United States Postal Service is the main handler of that flyer. The reality is Ulta deals with DHL e-commerce as the largest work-share partner of USPS. So we actually do the handling, encoding, distribution, and we figure out where it's going, and then hand it over to USPS to then distribute it around the country. So once again, kind of behind the scenes, you would never know DHL existed. Half the time when I tell people I work for DHL, they're like, I thought they went out of business. So it's a weird position to be in. And then lastly, post and parcel. That's just the German version of USPS, really not relevant in most conversations. They just move mail. So any questions? I'm going to try to make this more interactive than just a presentation. So any questions right off the bat verbally about any of the business units or what each of those individually do? No? Cool. So unfortunately, I couldn't get the media to work on my presentation, so I'm just going to flip between things to show you guys a little bit. So when we bring people through our innovation center, we start, the whole plan is we're trying to show what innovation looks like in supply chain at the year 2050, reeling it back to 2035, and then to a scale of like 2 to 3 years out. So when we come in, we're trying to invigorate these customers. So when they may think, I don't need innovation. They may think that it's not relevant to them, that what they're doing right now is perfectly fine. So we're trying to open their mind. We're trying to get them to realize that innovation is actually a really good thing that's going to save them a ton of money potentially. So this is the first video we play them. It shows what we're doing at DHL and why it's important. So let's hope that it works.
Can we change the future? What if the choices we make today set in motion a series of events that shape our lives and the future of logistics here and the world over? Breakthroughs in sensing technologies.
You guys should have said something that it wasn't playing. I'm sorry. Well, you heard the spiel, so you'll have to hear it again. All right, here we go. Yeah. Sorry about that.
Can we change the future? What if the choices we make today set in motion a series of events that shape our lives and the future of logistics here and the world over? Breakthroughs in sensing technologies and artificial intelligence applied to real societal and business needs are driving us to realize a new era of robotics and automation. At DHL, we see a thriving future. A future where innovation unlocks new value and pushes us farther than we've ever gone before. A future that supports our busy workforce at unprecedented levels so we can accomplish more. Our choice is clear. Our vision is the same as the direction we're headed. The future. What about you? What future do you imagine?
So, let me get back to the presentation. All right. So mainly that's meant to start the conversation so people start to realize a lot of times people are like, what was that in the middle of that video? So we had a lot of concepts in there from robotics and automation. We had bionic enhancement. So that's like a approaching Iron Man suit with an exoskeleton. There's a bunch of IoT in there. So we're just trying to get that conversation going. So why is this not showing? Sorry. All right, there. So really, we're bringing people through We have 4 main areas. We have this main area with robotics and automation. We have a vision portal that's talking about where we see supply chain moving in the year 2050, and then DHL's interpretation of where that's going. Luckily, you guys honestly will be the first people to ever see the video from inside that room, outside of that room. They've never really let us do it, and I found the file, so I brought it with me. And then we have our trends lab, so that's pushing like 2 to 3 years out where we're seeing everything move. It's kind of a blend of products that are available today. IoT is one of those. You can get some IoT products, but some of it's like, okay, in a couple years we see this being a big trend. And lastly, we have a solutions hub, because all of these concepts are really cool and really awesome, but if you can't do anything tangibly with them, they really prove themselves useless. So it's really important that we can transform that idea into actionable projects. So I'll show you the video of DHL in the future. I chose transportation and 3D printing, so hopefully you guys think that's interesting.
How does transport look in the year 2050? The global movement of goods is dematerialized.
And let me just mention something important to note, why it's a weird shape. This is actually like 3D boxes that are built in front of you. I always tell, maybe not like the serious customers, if you're ever gonna do hallucinogenics, this is the room to do them in, because things are building in front of you and it is the trippiest thing you'll ever see. So you can kind of get the interpretation here. Obviously I'm not condoning doing those, but if you were to, this is when.
Our modern world is characterized by the transport of material products, particular types of commodities, individually packaged. We send everything everywhere, around the clock. But what if goods no longer had to be physically moved? If they could be converted into weightless data streams that could be beamed to any location? That would be the future of digital transport in 2050. Dematerialization is the term for this modern process. Every product becomes a code so it can race at the speed of light over the earth on data highways, free from congestion or delay. In this process, every coded product would have an exact destination and reach it safely. There, local materializing centers would take over, converting the data back into products. All the necessary information is transferred as data packages to a 3D printer. This then simply prints out the desired object, from gym shoes to home furnishings.
So this is DHL's interpretation.
Specialists adapt their distribution structures to these new conditions. In the year 2050, they operate dematerialization centers all over the world. With a home fabbing kit, they also provide an additional service for end users.
So, it is really cool to see in person. Every single time I'm still just like, I've seen a bunch, I'm just like, this is so cool. So let's get back in there. All right, so we've talked about 2050, kind of moving now into 2035. We developed this thing called the trend radar, and the trend radar is our projection of how we're progressing all these technologies. It is next to the airway bill, the #1 downloaded document on DHL.com, which is very strange to me, but people love it, I guess. So you can see all these trends. On the left side, you have social and business trends. On the right side, technology trends. The closer you are to the nucleus, the closer we are to actually realizing those trends. And the closer to the center it is, the bigger impact you're going to have. So right off the bat, there are some ones that I'm sure you've seen or heard of. Internet of Things, obviously the most important, in my opinion. Big data analytics, next generation wireless, talking through low power wide area networks, things like Sigfox or narrowband IoT networks. Any of those subjects you guys have questions about? You're like, what is that? There's a few weird ones up there. So silver economy is the realization that as we have an aging workforce, that we're having to redefine what work looks like. So this is really important talking through like exoskeletons, because people that maybe are in their 60s or 70 years old, working in like a tire distribution center, they can't bend over and pick up that tire. So we're implementing exoskeletons that will assist and take about 40% of the load off of your back. So the feedback we've gotten so far is that they're saying, I went home and I felt like a 16-year-old again. So that feedback is immensely helpful, and it's not that tangible turnaround where you can say, I'm saving this much money, but it's employee retention. You don't have people turning around going, I gotta get out of the industry because I'm dying.
Are you building your own self-driving cars, or are you partnering with?
No, so the DHL got into a couple different areas where they wanted to invent their own technology, and there are a few handful that still exist, like IoT is one of those that we did dabble in, but I think the realization was we're a logistics company at our heart, and there are startups that are doing this type of topics way better than we ever could, and so I think it's a good blend of using our expertise in the industry and then finding those startups around the world to implement that. So a lot of what we do is startup scouting. So it's a lot of talking with companies out of Israel and the Silicon Valley to see where they can apply. Smart containerization. So there's a company called Fox Robotics, and their idea is that they are removing pallets from a container automatically. So you set the robot on its own, there's no human interaction, and it's offloading the container, and then this is like the opposite of that. So noticing that a box has this particular dimension and making sure you are using every square inch of that container using computer vision. Yeah, that is a very confusing topic. So my best interpretation of that one is, I know it's like technically a competitor, but Uber Freight is super grid logistics. So the idea is that our customers are, do you guys have Kroger out here? Or do you, okay, Kroger? Or no, you guys just told me about Wawa. Okay, we'll use Wawa in this example. And then we have Safeway, and we have Target and Walmart. So those are all customers of DHL supply chain. Right now, they're getting their own container and they're moving it across the country, and maybe they're not utilizing the entire container, or that container has to stop at multiple locations. Why don't we intelligently say, hey, you 4 customers, we're all going to the same location in Jersey City. Why don't we put all of your product into a single container and then offload it at the destination? So we're creating more of an intelligent supply chain grid. Any other ones that look weird? Weirdly, I was prepared with all those answers because those are the ones that always come up. Yeah? Servitization. We are changing the wording on that because it's really confusing. But basically being able to serve up information coming from sensors, coming from robotics, and using that to make actionable insight. So it's a very confusing term that people aren't a huge fan of.
What's the future of work?
So we just released a trend report about 2 months ago. The future of work is discussing, it's a pretty broad topic, not just in logistics, but what does it look like for work from home? How do you manage that with people that are being, people bring up robotics as a topic, and I think the first question people hear is, it's gonna take my job. I'm not gonna have a job anymore. And so as we see that, we see the future of work is gonna be, maybe you're not managing picking up a product, but now you're managing a robot that's doing that for you, and you're able to work from home because you're directing that robot 1,000 miles away. So it's a pretty broad topic, granted. Future of work is probably the largest of them, of what it covers, but just kind of working through where we're going as a workforce. Cool? Yeah.
I just have a question.
Yeah.
How did DHL prioritize each one of these? Because blockchain is out there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's us in this last one was virtually kind of locked in a virtual room, just like arguing it out. So it's kind of all of the different subject matter experts weighing in and saying, these are projects we're seeing, this is the requirements we have, these are vendors that we know that are doing this, these are startups we're seeing. So kind of trying to see how much disruption are you going to cause with that technology? What's your ROI on it? And then, is it even available, or is it just a topic we've been hearing about, kind of whispers? So I think that's going to help plot it out. Other remaining ones before I switch slides? No? All right. So I'm not going to show you this next video. I love this next video, but I won't show it. I just paid a lot of money for it because it's IoT, so I try to utilize it as much as possible in marketing, but I won't bore you guys. So I know this is a business-centric group, so kind of explaining IoT as a concept to make sure that you guys are all kind of on the same page. So IoT, Internet of Things, it obviously started as a very consumer-focused topic. So like my Apple Watch is a connected device. A Nest thermostat is an IoT device just for the consumer at home. But as we take that topic and now integrate it into business and supply chain specifically, how can we take everyday objects, everyday concepts, and make them intelligent, interactive, and I think the business piece of this is how can we take what they're collecting and utilize that on future activities? So we know this is like a little big brother, but like let's say you use your Nest thermostat and you're utilizing it in a certain way. Wouldn't it be really nice for the energy company to know your usage history? I don't think that they're actually reporting that, but that would be really nice for their business model. Same thing in supply chain. So we can put sensors on anything within our supply chain, and we can start to understand movement patterns. We can understand if there's disruptions. There was a use case with, down in Mexico, they saw that a shipment was consistently getting damaged from point A to point B, and they didn't understand why. So we put sensors on it, and we understood that the damage was happening at the exact same place every single time. They went to the site, there was a massive pothole in the middle of the highway. So we worked with the local government and we filled the pothole, no more damage freight. So these are like weird little things like how IoT can play this very niche solutions. But yeah. So the reason, or the whole hierarchy of IoT, so let's say we have a car. So today I was just down the street putting sensors on, they call them Uboats. So like when you go into like a 7-Eleven, they put a bunch of crates on it and they wheel that thing in there. That's called a Uboat. I found that out. So that's an object or an asset to them. So inherently it's dumb. It doesn't really know anything about itself or where it is. So we're going to put a sensor on it. I put this device on it today, or one that's just like this. Cool. So this is just the hardware piece of it. But now I need to be able to network into it. So we're talking next generation wireless. This one is using a network called narrowband IoT. So to get into the very technical side of all this, so everybody has iPhones or something comparable, I'm assuming. So iPhones went from 2G to 3G to 4G, now 5G. So they're getting ultra fast, ultra high, or high bandwidth, 4K YouTube videos. These sensors do not need that. They just need small bits of information broadcasted very infrequently. So some companies clued into that and they're like, why don't we just provide a really bad network, essentially? And it's called narrowband IoT or LTE Cat-M or Sigfox or LoRaWAN. Those are all types of low power wide area networks that these types of sensors can take advantage of. So we've now networked this device using NB-IoT. And we've created that infrastructure. We have all that data that we're collecting. We have to feed it somewhere. So we're going to put it into a platform. DHL has our own platform, just like every company does anymore. Everybody has their own IoT platform. So we've now put it into a platform where we can say, I know where this asset is now, which is cool, but it's really not actionable. So I need to apply analytics to it so I can start to understand trends and see what happens. And at the end of it, that's the entire solution. You can't offer a single layer of this without thinking through the entire picture. Each piece is really important. So, talking through the hardware aspect of this, so we've just seen what IoT is and why it's important. We've seen the layers to create an IoT solution. A lot of customers come to us and they say, we want full visibility of where our stuff is, and I want it to tell me shock and humidity and temperature and location, and I also want it for like nothing. I want it free or very little cost. It just doesn't exist. So we started this unattainable triangle. So I admittedly stole this from my days when I was a marketing major, but the unattainable triangle is battery life, functionality of the device, and price. So you have to have that conversation of a trade-off of any of this to say, okay, so you want something that's very functional, you want something that's going to last 2 years, you're going to pay a lot of money for that. Or you want something really cheap and it has minimal functionality, it might have great battery life. So there's always that trade-off, and this goes into a lot more than just IoT, that everything really going into business when we start talking through supply chain, you always have to have that customer realization so that way we're approaching the problem together. So a few broad use cases that we have with IoT. I don't know if you guys knew this, like one of the examples up here is a smart, I think it's up there. It's a smart city, so like your gas meter on your house, a lot of gas meters have these types of devices on them monitoring the usage, so the gas company just drives by and they just get that information without having to come and bother you to read the meter. Obviously, we're putting things on planes. So the 4 primary use cases that we focus on are shipment visibility, asset tracking, inventory tracking, and condition monitoring. And that condition monitoring is like facility condition monitoring. So this is where, is anybody familiar with the book Goosebumps? Yeah? All right. So remember how that was like a pick your own journey as you go through the book? That's what we're going to do. So I'm going to shut up now, and I'm going to wait for somebody to call out what you want to learn about. Which of those 4 use cases interest you guys the most?
Asset tracking.
Thank you. So asset tracking, obviously we put the sensor on the Uboat. The biggest innovation we've seen with asset tracking is RFID. So everybody knows the concept of RFID. You guys are likely too young to remember that in 2003, 2004, Walmart pushed heavily to say, we're going to RFID everything, and we're going to force all our suppliers to do it. The technology was not there, the cost wasn't there, and it backfired. So now everybody hates RFID. And it's not justifiable because it's actually a great technology. So in the past year or so, maybe 2 years, we've started to reapproach that topic of RFID. The labels themselves are mediocrely better. They're not all that different. But the innovation there and the real advantage is the infrastructure side of it. So now we're being able to offer real-time location using standard passive RFID tags so we know where they are in our entire supply chain autonomously. So I was just talking to Peter about it. Freight inherently shifts. So as you want to get a pallet in a cross-dock facility like DGF, well, if you want to get the pallet behind it, you have to move the one in front of it. And then you want to get the one behind that one, and it moves again. So all of a sudden, an hour later, the pallet that was documented to be there is 40 feet that way. And we have no idea where it is, and it turns into this search and rescue mission where we're being penalized with fees potentially, or we just lose it and we have no idea where it is. So this is just a very regular standard DHL global forwarding tag. In the back of it though, it has an inlaid RFID tag. So this is nothing special, it's just a standard passive RFID tag, but overhead scanners now are telling us intelligently where it is as they just move through the system without us interacting with it, which is really creating a new level of inventory of our own assets. All right. Which one next? Cool. I'm going to go to RFID again, unfortunately. So with that, that's moving pallets through the system. DHL Express, remember the one that moves yellow boxes, they came to us and said, so let's imagine I'm shipping a box to Germany, and I don't fill out the customs forms correctly, and they get to Germany. What do you do with that box? They can't deliver it legally because it wasn't properly manifested, so they have to do something with that package. So they put it into an area called held inventory, and eventually that'll go to abandoned inventory. Managing that stock is a nightmare. I went down to Argentina a couple weeks ago to look at their abandoned inventory, and I walked into it, and there were pallets upon pallets, 100 feet deep. It was insane, and they have zero visibility of what is back there. So we're now we're proposing using RFID tags, and they'll now have a overhead system that will track it to provide RTLS and handhelds. So it's kind of like a geigometer. You guys know what that term is? It's like as you get closer to the tag, it'll like beep, 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 and so you get immediately. So what was once taking them I'm not kidding you, 2 days to find a single product when they needed to go find it for customs declaration purposes, we're now offering up that information to them in under a minute. So we're saving so much LOE or full-time equivalent. All right, next one.
Condition monitoring.
All right, so in the entire supply chain, temperature is very important. So think about like COVID-19 vaccines. So that was, I'm sure you guys heard in the news, like it needs to be negative 80 degrees Celsius in order for the vaccine to stay effective. So we needed to put sensors everywhere in the entire supply chain to make sure that we were keeping that temperature so the vaccine was effective. So not only were we putting sensors in the actual shipment themselves, but we were putting sensors like this one. This isn't, oh, actually, I thought I brought one of the other one. No. Oh, here it is. These are pharma-grade condition monitoring devices, so you can put them on the wall, and then they broadcast over that low-power wide-area network, and they're telling us what the conditions are inside of a standard room, a cool room, or a cold room, so we know if it's maintaining that. So we do like temperature monitoring, and we'll put 40 of these in a single room, so we can understand there's like a hot point in the weird corner of the room for some reason, and then we can try to fix that. And then this device is similar, it's just not pharma grade, but the benefit here is it's really cheap. It's like $85 for 5 years, which is pretty unheard of in IoT, but this can provide really eased visibility into anywhere in your facility. The eventual goal here is, this is great data, but wouldn't it be cool if it interactively with the air conditioning system? So there are companies now coming out like Be Bright, so think of like Nest for your house, but for a huge facility. How do we now say, I know that there are 10 trucks coming in, I'm gonna open those dock doors in a few minutes, that's gonna let a ton of hot air in, but it's gonna rain in an hour and it's gonna drop the temperature 10 degrees, so where's that balance of how much I need to actually cool my facility? So we're trying to be really intelligent about it to save energy. And the last one is shipment visibility, if I'm not wrong, yeah. So most of IoT and supply chain is shipment visibility. That is what supply chain is moving stuff. And all these customers are saying, well, where is it? At the end of the day, I can scan it 100 times, but I don't actually know pinpoint where it is. So we're putting sensors onto each of these boxes or pallets to say, I know exactly where that shipment is at any given point. So probably the most interesting of these that I have with me is this one. So as the COVID-19 vaccine moved around, this controllant device was actually put onto the shipment, and then this tail was put in, and it was monitoring the internal temperature to make sure that it was being kept at negative 80 degrees. There was a chip shortage, I think you guys probably heard about, and this device was unavailable, mainly because we bought almost all of them. And so we had to pivot, and so we actually started to work with a company called Logmore, and I'll pass these around too, because these are some cool devices. So we had to pivot to this device. It's not a smart device in the fact it's connected, but it actually has a QR code on it, and then as I just toss it and it logs that G-force or the ambient temperature around me, it'll actually update that QR code on the screen, and then I can use my smartphone or a handheld gun and scan that QR code and immediately backhauls that information into the portal. So just a different way of approaching shipment visibility. All right, am I good to move on, or any questions, everybody? So I'm not going to bore you with this. It just shows the entire portfolio of devices that we have. Passive being the sensors, like this one with the QR code that I just discussed. Active being the ones that are actively communicating via cellular, in case we had questions about that. So that's the end of my actual presentation. Where are we? All right, I'm doing pretty good. So I brought a ton of samples here to talk through things. I know this is a ton of information, and a lot of it isn't super sexy sometimes, so I brought the cool stuff to also talk through. So if you want, I can kind of step you through some of the cool innovations that we're seeing come out. Is that all right? Yeah? All right, so like this device is a traditional shipment tracker. It'll monitor G-force, location, temperature, humidity. It's nothing special, honestly, but it does the job good. But the thought was, what if we're already putting a shipment label onto every shipment with an airway bill? Why don't we just integrate everything into that? So you already saw the shipment label from DGF, and it has an RFID chip in it. That's cool. But what if we make that active? So we're working with a couple of suppliers, And this itself, you see how thin that is? That is an active sensor. So it's communicating over narrowband IoT. In theory, you'd be able to print your airway bill on this. To the layman, it just looks like an airway bill. It just looks like a standard label on your shipment. And then at the end of this, we have full visibility all along the supply chain up to your doorstep. So in this, and also this perforated line here, when I cut it into the package, I'd also now have a heartbeat saying the package is opened. So think of like consigned activities in the healthcare industry. A lot of times companies will put their product in the hospital because if they need a product for an emergency surgery, they can't wait a couple hours for it to be delivered. They need it in the stock room, but they're not charged until it's used. The unfortunate part is the hospital isn't the best at keeping records of when things were used and if they were used at all. So products like that are now showing, I know that they cut into it, it was opened. It's approaching that blockchain theory, so everything is very autonomous. I know when it was open, charge the account. Although blockchain is entirely more complicated than that, I'm sure you guys realize. So that's a cool concept. These two are pretty similar. This is actually a Bluetooth tag. You can see how thin that is again. It has a 2-year battery life on it. So you guys have heard of lithium-ion batteries. Not the greatest thing on airplanes sometimes. So this is using an alternative technology or chemistry called zinc polymer battery. So they're trying to rethink how the sensors work. They're trying to think, how do we get it more accepted onto airplanes? But it still is a battery. So this company, Uboat, I don't know if you can see that. Uboat said, let's just take the battery out of it. So this is a batteryless tag. So we all know that Wi-Fi is all around us, Bluetooth is all around us, and they're taking advantage of that. So this is called energy harvesting. So all around us is these frequencies, and it's just grabbing that energy at a 2.4 gigahertz range and then rebroadcasting it out. This is honestly the future of supply chain. Right now, the cost of this is like $4 to $5, which is just too much. But if they can get it down to the sub 10 cent region, your packages are going to have this tag on it, and they may or may not have gotten a couple $100 million from Amazon. So I think they're probably pushing in the right direction. So I think this is going to replace stamps at some point, so you know exactly what's in your mailbox before looking at it, which is mind-boggling. And then I'll also mention, this is a little bit older model, but this is an e-ink display. They have bigger ones now. They have color e-ink displays. The idea being here, we could just replace the entire concept of an airway bill, and we could just tap this, update the airway bill, and this is going to a more sustainable approach of supply chain, so we don't have to have all this waste because supply chain produces a ton of waste. So if we can replace that, we have a more sustainable approach to IoT and a more sustainable approach to just logistics in general. So, oops. All right, any questions on any of those products? Yeah.
Microphone.
You talked about the movement of things. Can you talk a little bit about how this could be put into clothing for movement of people or tracking where people are?
Yeah. So we're working on a couple different products called Employee Resource Tracking. Yeah. There's many acronyms in supply chain. So the idea being, I want to make the most efficient operation as possible. So we can use all these technologies, all these different products to now track people, because things like Bluetooth that are on your phone, it's not just connecting to your headset, but it has BLE, Bluetooth Low Energy 5.0, uses something called angle of arrival and time of flight. So it knows how long that signal was there and back. It knows at what angle it came into the gateway, that receiver, and it can now precisely say, I know where that thing is, which is pretty creepy, I guess. So we can now put that on a person and track where that person's moving as well. We're using RFID to do the same thing. We're putting embedded tags into their shoulders. So the big piece there is everybody in HR, human resources, saying, no, you can't track people. So it has a lot to do with change management to make sure that people know we're actually anonymizing data behind the scenes. So we'd never actually know who anybody is. We're putting them into role-specific tags. So we just know, okay, the packers are the ones that are this particular tag, and we know that they spent this much time. Because really, if you misallocate person's time in the facility, it could sway a bid for a future operation dramatically. I mean, hundreds of thousands of dollars realistically. So it's really important that we get it right. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
From a different perspective, it is very interesting, and thank you very much for your excellent presentation.
Oh, thank you.
But from a different perspective of employment,
Yeah.
I see many benefit IoT devices and the AI technology bring in logistics. How do you see the future impact on the employment this kind of the technology brings in? It may have some negative impact. In other words, you may need less and less people working in your distribution center or your warehouse.
Yeah.
How do you see the future of these technologies impact?
Yeah, it's a tough conversation to have because like everybody comes into the innovation center and they ask us, when can we get to a lights out facility? Meaning you walk out into the floor and it is pitch black, yet everything is working perfectly and product is moving, it's being picked, it's being palletized, it's being moved. I've seen one operation getting close to that, and we're just not there yet. But yeah, it's a weird conversation of what does that look like for the humans then? Because we're still a growing population, so what are we doing? And it moves to that management side then. So you need skilled workers to not be skilled at actually moving things, but rather being on the administration of the robots, being on the administration of IoT, monitoring the shipments, making sure things are moving accordingly. But yeah, it's unfortunately, it's the future of work. People are going to have to go into a more professional path. But yeah, it's an unfortunate answer, I know, but it's a reality. Yeah.
Is that going to be used for performance measurement
No.
for employees?
So it would probably be aggregated into a output number to say how are we doing as a team. But like I said, we're anonymizing the data before, so we're putting an edge computing system on it so it never actually leaves that edge. So once it leaves there, we already have an aggregated volume, like aggregated analysis of the data. So we won't even be able to say that Joe was lazy this day. We just know that collectively that team was lazy that day. And that's good for performance conversations because inherently, like, I think it takes bias out of the conversation because maybe you have a manager that may not be a particular fan of an employee and they can start to claim bias against them. Well, this is creating hard fact answers to why there were performance conversations. So I think it's taking potentially some prejudice out of workplace as well to be able to have factual conversations.
So I was wondering if you thought that the technology would be applicable to any like consumer-based products, like maybe leaving it in their car or seeing, I don't know, like.
Here, hold the microphone. I can't hear you, sorry.
Do you think any of the technology you discussed today would be applicable to market to like a consumer where they would like maybe leave it in their car or use some of the technology to like gauge their things as opposed to an industry as well?
Yeah, so I think there's like two really cool kind of push back into the consumer side of it. So I think you mentioned the car. So there are sensors into your ODB2 outlet on your car that can monitor usage of your car, how well your gas performance is. We use those right now on DHL vans to make sure that the drivers aren't driving crazy. They still do for some reason, even though they know that it's being monitored. So pushing back like with that, I think it's going into like a shared workforce that you could have that conversation. And then also there's a new tag that I just had a conversation with a company like a couple weeks ago. Their primary goal is to do market research. So right now, if you buy a bottle of laundry detergent at Target, that company knows the volume that's moving out of that Target, and that's good data to know, but that's where everything ends for that company right now. So these tags are Bluetooth-based tags, and they actually monitor the interior usage of the product. So, and it will connect to your phone. You have to opt in, granted, and have an app on your phone, and I think they pay the participants. But you can kind of see the future of this, that these tags now, as they're on your shelf and you're pouring that detergent into your washing machine, it's monitoring that usage, and so it's giving that information back to the company so they can intelligently say, I know how this product is actually being used in real life, which is data that we've never been able to get access to. And that's cool on its premise, but then think about how cool it is for us as consumers, because think like, you guys remember Amazon those dash buttons? Complete failure. After that, they did dash scales. So then it's understanding the scale of a product or the weight of it. So once it gets to a certain level, it'll automatically reorder that product for you. It's a cool idea. I don't think a lot of people have heard of it, so obviously it hasn't been a big win. But what if we just put a tag on it and automatically I know when it gets to a certain level and it'll immediately send that data to Amazon, and before you're out, you have a new product on your doorstep. So it's creating that, like, I don't even need Amazon.com anymore. It's still a back-end system, but I'm not requiring any interaction, which is really nice, or scary. I mean, I guess however you want to look at it. Yeah?
Just from like hearing about the really cool products that you have at DHL, it just becomes apparent to me, like, how has privacy issues like become a limitation to you guys? You require quite a bit of data.
Yeah. Yeah, so the question was privacy and considerations around that topic within kind of all this visibility of product. So we're a lot of times shipping our own products, and it's in our supply chain, and so we don't really need to have that privacy conversation. It's change management. We're tracking employees and helping them understand kind of to what you were talking about with we're anonymizing the data, we're aggregating it, we don't know. But really, when we're putting a lot of these sensors onto products, there's really nothing that's really all that private about it. I mean, the value of it definitely outweighs the concern of any kind of privacy at that point. But I mean, like we were just talking about a particular logistics provider that was just like hacked a couple of months ago. Yeah. So the problem with that is, and the terrifying part of that is, DHL moves a lot of stuff. So if somebody hacked into DHL, the problem there is we're moving a lot of our stuff. We're also moving a lot of other people's stuff. So a company that maybe doesn't have fair trade practices, maybe is using child labor, they may not hack into their system. They're going to hack into our system because they know that what we do is affecting their supply chain. So therefore, we have to be really beefed up on our security, because I don't think people really will have a problem with, I mean, maybe they will, but maybe they're not going to have a problem with DHL. They're going after our customers. So it's a very weird situation to be in, that somebody may not actually be attacking us for us.
When I think about privacy, I think this thing has information about me, and I wonder if this is going to connect to my healthcare provider. And Peter had 2 beers on Saturday, and what that's going to do. But on the package, I think all this stuff is eventually going to translate into the consumer.
Well, and I think it's like a very generational thing, because I know my parents are like, they don't want any of the Find My things on their phone turned on. Me, I think there's a lot of value there, and I turn everything on. I'm like, yeah, give me all the data. This is great. So I think it's just like a very weird kind of shift that's happened between generations of why not make everything smart? Why not make it intelligent? Why don't I benefit from that information? Yeah.
One of the things I'm seeing is like a lot of these sensors tell you the current state of where things are, or the temperature or something like that. But I still think, you have to chip something, so it's going to take a while to get there. So it's more about predictive things.
Yep.
Like force majeure, like weather or wars or things like that may be in the way or along the path of that product. So are there technologies that will predict stuff?
Yeah. So there are companies out there. One of them is a spin-off from DHL. It was called 360, I think, but now they're called Everstream Analytics, and that's exactly their bread and butter. They're doing predictive analytics. They they've been tapping into ELDs, which long-haul trucks, any kind of semi, is required by the Department of Transportation to have this ELD on it, and that electronic logger device, I believe what it stands for, is automatically giving information back to the DOT. So they're not violating like requirements to only drive X amount of hours per day. They saw a dramatic shift in, I'm not making this up, drug usage from truck drivers when they were being monitored and their habits were being monitored. So there was a lot of good that came out of that, but also there's a ton of data now too, which is really cool for companies. So Everstream Analytics is taking that and saying on this particular path, it was this temperature, this is the weather, this is what happened. So when I know that the forecast in 2 days is gonna be a particular thing, I know that, okay, I need to put a refrigerated truck on this path. They're seeing the fact that when there's political unrest, they'll now intelligently reroute the trucks to go around, Ukraine being the perfect example. I don't know if you guys have seen those maps of like the aircraft in the area around Ukraine and how like on that one day that they closed the airspace, it just like, and it was empty. So that kind of thing, but think on like the ground side of it. They're intelligently forecasting that and seeing that thing and they're predicting it. I have some additional products too I wanted to show you guys. So just, I said that DHL isn't big on creating new products. These are all third parties, but we do dabble, like I said. So the conversation of RFID, if you can't tell, I'm a big fan of RFID. I think there's a lot of opportunity there. So within the 4 walls, so you'll hear 4 walls in supply chain. That just means in a distribution center or within the facility. Once a product leaves the 4 walls, where there's maybe RFID infrastructure, I have tons of visibility in there, but once it leaves, it's a black hole, and I have no idea where that product is. I have no idea when it got off that truck, and it causes a lot of frustration and issues and fines. So we said, well, we can't control the other side, who likely is not a DHL facility, but what I can control is the back of the truck. So that yellow bar at the top there is the first of its kind in the world, and it is an RFID mobile gateway. It's battery powered, taps into the truck's power, and it's actively reading the tags as they move on and off the truck. Unfortunately, the first round it got to the air cargo facility, they weren't paying attention and it ripped off the top. But that's innovation at its core. It's duct tape and glitter at the end of the day. You need to make it look good, you need to get some preliminary data, and then you go and iterate and make it sure it looks better. I wasn't in Chicago today, but they just installed the new version of this, which has a curved entrance and it has a backer in front of it. So if they're going to impact it, it'll hit that and it'll crumble first. But that's the only way you can do this. You have to learn it. So, and then, let's see. We're working with this company. It looks like a TV, but it's not. This is actually an RFID reader again. Once again, I love RFID. So it goes on the front of a forklift, and they just drive around a facility, and it's just scanning everything in the facility, and it knows where everything is automatically. So it's creating an autonomous inventory with no human interaction other than just the fact that they're driving the forklift. And then this is what I just took this picture like 3 hours ago, but that's the device I showed you, right? I don't know why I think this is so cool. Like, that's there. So that's the Uboat that I was talking about. There's 2 sensors, and it's all about just comparing. So we're doing like an A/B test, and then we're also doing like you guys know a blue-green test? Is that familiar to you guys? No, okay. So A/B test, I think it's pretty obvious, like you're just comparing 2 things. Blue-green comes from heavy in computer, like when you're programming, but I try to translate it into business. Blue-green is like you have nothing and you have something. Let's compare those 2. So it's like a time and motion. You're trying to compare what the impact of this new product is, whereas A/B is saying, I have product A and product B, how do they compare against each other? So we have these 2 products, and we have a dumb Uboat that's moving with this, and we're gonna see how many we actually lose, because these are, once again, somehow lost. In Germany, the sensor on the left, so this sensor, we put them on a bunch of carts. I don't have an explanation for what I'm about to say, but they were these carts, I don't have a picture of it, but they're like this tall and like huge. They're massive carts. They were losing 12,000 of those carts per year. I don't know who wants these carts and what they're doing with them and how people aren't like, why do you have a cart in your house or wherever it is? But we put these on there and we're tracking them now. I think we lost 5 in the past couple of years total. So it makes it really easy that not only, I mean, the cool part is, yeah, we're tracking it, but it also is like theft deterrence. So part of the reason they wanted these on there is so that the people at the 7-Elevens where this is going to, or I'm sorry, this is Family Dollar, at the stores, they don't want to take and keep these U-boats at the back of the store. They know they're being monitored, so they'll be like, oh, fine, I'll give them back. So it makes it way easier for our supply chain to keep track of our assets. Let's see. And then just to demonstrate like innovation in action, this is the employee resource tracking where we're tracking employees using the RFID tags that are inlaid in shoulders. This was a very duct tape version. You can barely see it, but you can see a rope kind of coming up the side of the building and then coming over, and then it comes down about a fifth of the screen, and there's a gateway there. So we wanted to just test the theory of could we track people, what data would it look like, what would that breadcrumb trail look like. So we hung this thing with a rope 30 feet in the air for a couple hours and just walked back and forth and pretended we were workers just to get the data to prove the value back to the customer to say, this is what it's going to look like, this is why it's going to be valuable. So once we get this done, then we install like a semi-permanent one, and that's like the track of innovation of you sometimes just have to go with it. You have to hang a rope from the ceiling that makes no sense as it's like spinning around up there and you're like, oh God, that's gonna fall and kill somebody. And then I wanted to also, this is the last one I was gonna show you, but I mentioned I went down to Argentina to talk through a DHL Express use case where they have like these boxes and you need to maintain them where the location is. These 2 whiteboards took 14 hours to draw. So this was a workshop between our team and the local people in Argentina, defining every single process. It's not a great, usually we're working with big whiteboards and they only had this, so it's kind of messy. But we're working through the entire process of how it gets through the entire supply chain. Once it gets off the plane, how they accept it, how they inventory it, how they put it away, where it moves to. And then we start to do gap analysis to say, where are there opportunities here to interject technology? Once we have that, we define our MVP, or minimum viable product, and these are the requirements for it. And these are the pieces that will feed into that of why there's return on that investment of each individual piece. And then we're working towards not just that MVP, but then we have a minimum marketable product, so MMP, and then something that I've learned from a couple of like innovation books is this last step of minimum awesome product. So you have, let's just prove that it's there. Then you have, okay, here's something we can actually sell. And then lastly, here's something that people are gonna be like, yes, I want that. So you have those 3 steps, those 3 layers of innovation of how you're developing these products. So I think that's the last one I have. So I think in sum then, I think supply chain, sometimes people are like, I don't really want to get in supply chain. I never thought I was going to work in supply chain. I was really happy in my airline career. And this came along and I realized there's a hell of a lot more to supply chain than just picking up a box and moving it. So like this entire innovation topic, it's redefining how we as a society will think of logistics in the next like 2 to 30 years, which is something I just never even conceptualized. And this exists in every single industry. So I know you guys are mostly bachelors. I think you said there was a few master's students in here potentially. I think like this is the conversation of like, don't just discount an industry, because I discounted supply chain. I thought, I do not want to be in that. And I got into this one. This is so cool. Like, don't discount it. Actually go into it and realize it and know that maybe you don't get in that first step, but you can grow into it eventually. Because I started at Southwest doing explosive trace material detection, just understanding if there's a bomb on the plane. Now I'm doing innovation. You tell me how that path makes sense, and it doesn't. But I think just kind of stumbling your way through it, you're never going to take that right turn, and that's okay. Like, you'll discover something you never realized was there. So, cool. All right, any other questions, last minute thoughts? No? All right, thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Alex, so much for this really, really interesting and informative talk.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for coming all day for us.
Oh, yeah, it was my pleasure, yeah.
Sharing your expertise and your time.
Yeah,
So,
thank you. Thank you.
just a little token of our
Oh, no, you don't need to do that. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Of our gratitude.
Thank you. I'm hoping.
Yes, yes. Tracking device, yes.
Yeah.
All right, if there are no questions, thank you, Dean Strausser, for coming. Thank you.
Thank you.
Assistant Dean Mark for coming. Thank you, Craig. Thank you, Sung. Thank you, Ben. And thank you, Peter, also for coming. Off. Thank you. Oh, Professor Chair Lavise.